We had like a sugar mama website that popped up.
Sugar mama. What is sugar mama?
American Trash crap came from a third party that I cannot reveal. I promised I have loyalty to people.
There is a moment in Darcey and Stacey where you can watch Darcey Silva's face change in real time, not dramatically, not with tears, but with that specific kind of stillness that happens when someone hears something they already knew and were hoping to never have confirmed out loud. The moment I'm talking about is when Georgi's ex-wife, Octavia, sits across from her and says, essentially, that she caught Georgi looking for wealthy women online. And Darcey just sits with it for a second. You can see the math happening behind her eyes. And then she defends him anyway. That moment is what this video is actually about. Not whether Georgi Rusev is a good person or a bad person. I genuinely don't know enough about his private life to make that call, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. What I want to talk about is the dynamic that played out on camera, what it reveals about Darcey's particular relationship with self-protection, and why this storyline was more complicated and more uncomfortable than most of the commentary around it has acknowledged. A lot of people watched this arc and arrived at a clean verdict. Georgi was a grifter, Darcey was a mark, end of story. My reading is messier than that. I think the show gave us enough footage to make a reasonable case that Georgi was in this relationship for reasons that weren't primarily about love. I also think the show gave us enough footage to see that Darcey was operating from a place of such profound emotional need that she was, in some ways, a willing participant in her own situation. Neither of those things cancels the other out. Both of them are sad. So let's actually walk through what happened. For anyone who needs the background, Darcey Silva became a fixture on 90 Day Fiancé, starting with Before the 90 Days, where she had a long, agonizing relationship with Meester, a Dutch fitness model about 10 years younger than her. That relationship ended badly and publicly. Then she moved on to Tom Brooks, another European man, also younger, also handsome, also featuring a relationship that aired out its most painful moments on national television. By the time Darcey met Georgi Rusev, a Bulgarian man working as a massage therapist, she had already established a very specific pattern. European men, significant age gaps, relationships that moved fast, and an emotional investment that always seemed to far outpace the other person's. Georgi entered the picture and got his own show with Darcey and Stacey, which ran on TLC alongside the main franchise. The show follows both Silva twins and their relationships, and it gave fans a longer, more detailed look at Darcey and Georgi than the original 90-day format would have allowed. What viewers saw across multiple seasons was a relationship that raised a lot of questions. Georgi didn't appear to have stable income or a clear financial picture. There were conversations on camera about money that were tense and inconclusive. Darcey was funding significant portions of their shared lifestyle, travel, outings, accommodations. None of that is hidden. It's all there in the footage. Now, here's where I want to be careful about what I'm saying versus what I'm speculating. There are corners of the fan community, and honestly, some corners of the commentary space that took the financial imbalance and ran it all the way to Georgi was a professional escort, or this was a transactional arrangement from the start. I've seen those takes. Some of them are more thoughtfully argued than others. But I want to be honest. The show itself never established that, and I'm not in a position to state it as fact. What I can say is that the financial dynamic was visible, it was lopsided, and it was a source of tension. What was actually motivating Georgi's behavior, what was happening in his head, is genuinely something I don't know. What the show did document, and what I think is worth taking seriously, is the conversation with Octavia. Georgi's ex-wife appearing on the show was genuinely remarkable television, and I don't mean that in a cynical way. It was remarkable because Darcey requested the meeting. She wanted to sit down with the woman who had been married to this man, presumably to get reassurance or information or some kind of clarity about who she was dealing with. And what she got instead was Octavia telling her, on camera, that she had discovered Georgi was active on a website designed to connect wealthy women with men looking for financial arrangements. I want to be precise about how I'm describing this because the framing matters. Octavia made this claim. The show aired it. Georgi denied it. Those are the documented facts. Whether Octavia's account was accurate, whether the profile she saw was recent or old, whether Georgi had already left that world or was still in it, none of that was definitively resolved on screen. What we have is one person's claim, delivered directly to Darcey, on camera, about her boyfriend's alleged online activity. Darcey heard it, sat with it for that brief, quiet moment, and then started defending Georgi. This is the part of the story I find most genuinely difficult to watch, and it's also the part that I think gets oversimplified in a lot of the commentary. The easy version of this narrative is that Darcey was naive, or stupid, or blinded by love. I don't think any of those things are true. What I think was happening was something more painful than any of those explanations. Darcey has, over years of reality television, shown a pattern of needing to be right about her choices more than she needs to be safe. There's a difference between those two things, and it matters. Being safe would mean hearing what Octavia said and at minimum pumping the brakes, asking harder questions, creating some space to figure out what was actually true. But being right, being the person who found love when everyone doubted her, being the one who finally crossed the finish line before her sister, being the woman who kept a hot, younger European man interested, that version of events required defending Georgi. It required having an explanation for everything uncomfortable. I'm not saying this to be cruel about Darcey. I actually think this is a deeply human thing. Most people, if they're honest, have been in a version of this where you've already told people something is good, you've already built your identity around a choice, and the cost of admitting you were wrong feels higher than the cost of staying. The problem is that the cost of staying in something that isn't working tends to compound over time. The phone call incident, which the show also covered, is the piece that most people point to as the smoking gun in this whole story. The claim, and again, I want to be clear, this is a claim, not a proven fact, is that a friend or someone close to the situation overheard Georgi speaking on the phone in Bulgarian, and that the content of that conversation included dismissive or derogatory comments about Darcey and the people around her. The phrase that got attached to this, and the one that clearly landed hardest with viewers, was American trash. Georgi denied this. His version was that the account was inaccurate, that he was being misrepresented, that people around Darcey were trying to undermine the relationship, and when confronted on camera, he became emotional. He framed it as being targeted, as being ganged up on, as the people around Darcey coming after him unfairly. Here's my honest read. I don't know what was said on that phone call. I wasn't there. The show didn't play audio, and I'm not going to pretend the account has been verified in a way it hasn't. What I do think is worth noting is the shape of Georgi's response when confronted. The shift from being accused to being the victim is a very specific move, and it worked. Darcey ended up in the position of reassuring the man who had allegedly insulted her. If you watch that scene and you've ever been in a relationship with someone who is very good at flipping a script, something about it will probably feel familiar. The other piece of the story that generated a lot of speculation from viewers, and I want to be careful here because this one goes further from documented facts, involving the details around Georgi's finances and the way he handled money. The show had moments where these things came up in passing. Conversations about income, about what he was paying for versus what Darcey was paying for, about the general picture of his financial life. Viewers, especially in fan forums, did a lot of extrapolating from those moments. Some of the theories that emerged were pretty extreme. I don't think it serves anyone to present those theories as established fact, so I won't. What I'll say is that the financial question was real. It was present throughout the relationship as documented on screen, and it was never satisfactorily resolved from what I saw. There's also Stacey's role in all of this, which is genuinely complicated and doesn't get enough nuanced attention. Stacey was, for most of this arc, consistently raising concerns about Georgi. And she wasn't wrong to raise them. The concerns she was flagging were legitimate. The red flags she was pointing to were visible to anyone watching. But the way those concerns landed with Darcey seemed to be less, "This is helping me think clearly," and more, "My sister is trying to control me." I think part of what made that dynamic so hard to watch is that twins have a particular kind of relational gravity. The competition between Darcey and Stacey, the comparison, the way their lives have always been measured against each other, all of that was live and in the room whenever Stacey tried to warn Darcey about Georgi. Darcey wasn't just hearing, "I think this man is bad news." She was also hearing, through her own filter, "I think you made another bad choice." And the second message, even if it was never said out loud, was the one that was shaping her response. So Stacey warning her became in some ways another reason to double down on Georgi, another reason to prove that she knew what she was doing. I genuinely don't think Darcey was being irrational in some simple way. I think she was responding to a whole web of pressures that extended well beyond just this one man. The engagement is worth addressing because it's the moment that crystallized a lot of what was happening. After everything the ex-wife's claims, the phone call incident, the financial questions, the Stacey conflict, Georgi proposed. He gave Darcey a ring. And the engagement became the justification for everything that had come before it. The logic seemed to be, if he proposed, then it was real, then I was right to stay. Then everything I excused and overlooked was worth it. The ring was, in my reading, functioning as evidence in a case Darcey was building for herself. Not just proof of love, but proof that her judgment hadn't failed. When you're carrying that much emotional investment in being right about a person, a ring does a lot of work. It temporarily quiets every uncomfortable question. The relationship did eventually end. The specific circumstances and timeline of how it concluded were not something the show fully detailed in real time, and I'm not going to fill that gap with speculation. What we do know is that they are no longer together. Whether the full story of what happened is different from what aired, whether there's more to Georgi's side of it, whether the most damaging claims about him are accurate, I genuinely can't say. I don't have access to information beyond what's been publicly documented. Now here's the counter argument to everything I've been saying, because I think it's worth taking seriously. It is entirely possible that Georgi was a genuinely flawed but not fundamentally malicious person who got caught up in a chaotic situation and handled it badly. Reality television has a well-documented ability to take ambiguous situations and edit them into clear villains and clear victims. Georgi's behavior on camera was not great. His response to the phone call accusation was evasive. His financial situation was unclear. But none of that automatically makes him a calculated predator. Some people are just in the wrong relationship. Some people are immature or avoidant or not equipped to handle the pressure of being on television with someone who is emotionally very high stakes. The worst version of Georgi and the he's just a bad match version of Georgi can produce very similar footage. I also think it's worth acknowledging that the show has a financial interest in making this story look as dramatic as possible. The American trash framing, the ex-wife reveal, the tears during the confrontation, all of that is gold for a reality show. I'm not suggesting those events were staged, but I am saying that the way they were presented, the music choices, the editing, the sequence of scenes, that's all constructed by a production team with its own agenda. Watching reality TV as if it's documentary footage is a trap, and I want to at least flag that I'm aware of it. The most charitable read of Georgi is a man who was in over his head, who made some genuinely bad choices, who handled pressure poorly, and who was in a relationship that wasn't working for reasons that weren't entirely his fault. Darcey is, by her own admission across years of television, an intensely emotionally demanding partner. That doesn't excuse the behavior she experienced, assuming the accounts are accurate, but it means the story isn't just one person was bad and one person was good. What I keep coming back to after all of it is that specific quiet moment when Darcey heard what Octavia said and chose to stay anyway. I don't think that choice was about being stupid or naive. I think it was about the fact that admitting Octavia might be right meant admitting a lot of other things too, about her pattern, about her choices, about the difference between the love story she was telling the world and the reality she was actually living. That's a painful reckoning to have privately. It's a genuinely devastating one to have on camera with millions of people watching. Whether or not Georgi was calculating, whether or not the worst theories about him are accurate, I don't know. The honest answer is, I don't have enough information to say definitively. What I do think is that Darcey deserved someone who chose her clearly, without ambiguity, without a financial arrangement that needed defending, without a phone call that had to be explained. And whatever the full truth of Georgi Rusev's motivations was, he wasn't that person. That's not a tragic conclusion exactly. It's just what seems true when you look at the footage honestly, without needing it to be a villain story or a love story. Sometimes people are just wrong for each other, and the real damage isn't done by the other person. It's done by how long you stay trying to make them right.